You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. Welcome to the big show, the circus tent in the sky, my friends, where we invite the greatest minds, the most brilliant people, the most intelligent authors, CEOs, billionaires, astronauts. God, who else are we on the show? Governors. Let's see, U.S. ambassador. I think I said that, and something else. But as you can tell, none of those people that are intelligent are me. So that's why we have guests on the show. We have a brilliant mind on the show. His mind is so brilliant that he's going to come here and you're going to listen to the show and you're going to have a glow that's going to be about you all day. It's going to be like a accented aura where you walk around and people be like, holy shit, you're more intelligent than you've ever been today. And for some of you, that may be a stretch, especially me. Anyway, guys, we'll be talking to him on the show. His amazing book. But in the meantime, as always, we cannot forget the plugs, because the plugs are so integral to the show. You know, I was listening to Sam, I think it was the Sam Harris show the other day, and he charges like $8 a month for his show if you listen to the podcast. We don't charge anything. So this gives me the point of reference to be able to shame you and guilt you into please go give the show 5 stars on iTunes and refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. It's real easy, and it's free too as well. YouTube.com/Chris Voss, Goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn. The big LinkedIn newsletter is pretty cool too, man. That thing grows by a couple hundred people every day. It's freaking insane. Anyway, to get to the most important part of our show, it's Monday, people. I can't say important. We have Yuri Gneezy on the show. He is the author of the hottest new book out on business and everything else, mindset, and we'll ask him what the hell is going on with this book. The new book is called Mixed Signals: How Incentives Really Work. Came out March 21st, 2023, hot off the presses. You can order it still steaming from wherever fine books are sold. Yuri Gneezy is on the show with us today, and we're really excited, if you can't tell, to have him on. Can you tell that I'm excited? I am excited. My nipples are hard right now. Yuri is the Epstein Atkinson and Down Chair of Behavioral Economics and professor at the Rady School of Management at the University of California, San Diego. See, I told you he was smart. He received a BA in Economics at Tel Aviv University and PhD in Economics at Tilburg University. He joined UC San Diego in 2006. Prior to that, he was a professor at the University of Chicago. I'm suddenly hungry for pizza. The Technion and the University of Haifa. I'm just going to run with that. He was a visiting scholar at the University of Amsterdam. I have some questions there. NHH Bergen and Burgundy School of Business. Welcome to the show, Yuri. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Great to be here. I hope we're not going to talk about my nipples, but other than that, I'm looking forward to it.
Sounds good. Sounds like a deal. So give us the .coms, wherever you want people to get to know you better on the interwebs, maybe stalk you a little bit there.
So I'm not that much on social media, but you can definitely Google my name, find my webpage, and I'm always happy to receive emails from people.
There you go. Is this your first book? I imagine you've written some other ones, right?
It's my second one. I have one with John List that was published 10 years ago.
There you go. So what motivated you want to write this current book?
So I'm 55, and at this age you need to make a change. You need to make life interesting. So I could have had a new red Ferrari maybe, or marry a 25-year-old. This sounds it's not for me. So I tried to write a book and try to spread the word about what I'm doing.
There you go. So give us a 30,000-foot overview of what the book Mixed Signals: How Incentives Really Work is about.
We're all driven by incentives, whether we know it or not. Incentives are motivating us. And, so I'm here, I'm trying to sell my book. You are trying to sell your podcast. Your listeners trying to become smarter, whatever, entertained. We all have some kind of incentive to do it. And one thing that many people ignore when they design incentives is the signal that they send. When you give someone incentives, you send a signal about what's going on. And that's really, this signal is what I'm studying, to see how you can improve the way incentives work by actually understanding the signals and managing them.
Now, is the book largely in a business format, or is it also incentives like, I don't know, maybe how to get your kids to clean their room?
The last one is hard. I have 3 kids. I was never successful with that. But yes,
that's why I sent mine up for adoption.
It's definitely not just business. We have incentives everywhere we go, right? It's definitely not just the business world. So if you employ people and you want to incentivize, clearly that's for you. But also if you're just interested in why, some things happen in the world, you look at the news, you see someone getting $500,000 vacation paid by someone else. How does this influence their decision? Those are the kind of things that we discuss.
There you go. So you get into behavioral economics, game theory, psychology, and field work. Jesus, as CEO, basically my incentives were like, do your shit or I'll fire you. No, I'm just kidding. I wasn't that mean. I wasn't like that, folks. Although a couple employees I might have been with. Don't quote me. Anyway, so what are incentives? I mean, when you mentioned that we all live, for incentives. Like, as a young man, I did everything possible to gain the favor of women that would be interested in me. Fast cars, money, and all that sort of stuff. Is that kind of what you talk about in this book a little bit?
That's definitely incentives, right? So that's absolutely incentives.
The
definition, the boring definition is something that will make you to act in a way that you wouldn't otherwise, right? That's the so if you have sponsors that you talk about, you wouldn't have talked about them if they weren't paying you something, right? Mm-hmm. So all of this good stuff, that's something that will make you change your ways. Now, it could be to buy my stuff, or it could be incentives to exercise more. So if you go to the doctor and the doctor can offer you some kind of incentives to exercise more, that's also incentive.
So you call the book Mixed Signals. Why? And I noticed on the cover of the book, you have green, yellow, and red. And what's interesting about that is the green is in the form of a stop sign. The yellow is in the signal of what would normally be green, and I think the red triangle is in stop or slow down or something.
Right.
I'm not sure if I have that correctly. Is my interpretation of that right? What does that mean?
So the idea is that, like I said, that incentives send signals, and if the signal is not aligned with what you want to have, that's a problem. So if you tell your people, look, I really want you to concentrate on quality, but then you incentivize them for quantity to make more, then quality is going to suffer, and you need to understand this. If you tell people you need to be creative, right? And being creative means that sometimes you're going to fail. You're increasing the variance. You're more likely to produce very good shows, let's say with you, or papers in my case, but you're also more likely to fail, to do something that will just bump. Right? So if you have the same people that all other podcasts have on, it's going to be safe. But if you try to find interesting people, some of them are going to be much better, some of them are going to be worse. Now, if you're going to be punished for the failure, you'll go with the first one. You'll take the safer options, safer people to talk with. But if you'll be said, look, you tried, it turns out that this guy looks interesting, but he's really boring, that's fine, let's move on. That would encourage you to actually look for more. But if my incentives is firing you or punishing you or not giving you a bonus if sometimes you fail, that's bad, right? I would rather listen to a podcast in which sometimes you have brilliant people and sometimes it doesn't work. I can just move on, right?
There you go. Yeah, some people do that with my comedy on the show. Sometimes the jokes kill and sometimes they die. And then I just kind of always hope that if they die, that they're still funny. That if I die, then they kill. And there's really art to it when you really study comedy. But some people are good at dying and they kill with it. But I think most of my audience just thinks I'm funny because I'm stupid. So there's that.
You have to work, with your hand.
Yeah, I don't know. They tolerate me. So anyway, give us some examples. What's an example of an incentive that maybe goes wrong?
So let me tell you a story. Imagine that you live in a cold place. In the morning, you see your neighbor going to the recycle center with a large bag of soda cans. What are you going to think about her?
She drinks a lot of Mountain Dew.
That's one thing. And she's a great person also, no? It's about the
Yeah,
environment.
sure. Recycling, helping the universe. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She could have thrown it to the trash. She is trying.
Hmm.
She might think the same about herself, right? Oh, I'm a great person. I could have just thrown. Now imagine that you live in a place where they give you 5 cents for each soda can.
Probably. Yeah.
Again, you see her walking in the morning to the recycle center with 100 soda cans. Now you're going to say, "Oh, she is cheap, right? For $5, really?" She
Yeah.
might think that about herself, right? She might change their view. So what we did, we just added incentives that, in principle, if you're an economist, you would say everything else should be the same. And now you're also giving her $5. What can go wrong? Well, the signal that you're sending goes wrong.
And it goes wrong. And give it to me again. And it goes wrong in what way?
It goes wrong that instead of thinking, "Oh, she's a great person," now you think she's actually a cheap person.
Ah.
Right?
So you can
interpretation. You don't really know her well enough. You try to interpret who she is by looking at her actions.
There you go. This reminds me of the Rush album, Signals. So, you talk about something like visible tattoos and Hell's Angels, and sometimes why they get tattoos on their neck, et cetera, et cetera. Talk to us a little about what that signals.
So the story goes I started thinking about it with my accountant. He's a nice guy, but being an accountant in April it's hell, right? You see one more. So I asked him what drives him. Now he showed me a picture on the wall with him on his bike. Now him and his buddies go on a bike tour in June. Everything is great. He gets all the gear, right? He has money. He can buy the jacket. He can buy everything. But when they'll enter the bar, you'll know that they are not the real deal because they will not have tattoos. So if you are the real deal, you'll go and have, these big neck tattoos that show that that's a commitment. Why? Because you can't. If my accountant would have a neck tattoo and I'll show up in his office with the neck tattoo, I'll be scared. I don't want, that kind of person maybe to run my stuff. I maybe won't have a problem with this, but his bosses will not like it. Right, so that's why it's really credible. If you go for the neck tattoos, you go for all these kind of credible signals. That means, look, I'm the real deal. I'm not just doing it on my spring break.
I'm owning it. Is that psychologically typical of people that use tattoos? They're using it for signaling.
I think so, right? So think about why you do it. You really want to show. Again, I can tell you, look, I'm a funny guy. I do stand up. I can tell you many things. It's very cheap, right? But once you have a tattoo, that's a commitment.
There you go.
And that's why it's a valuable signal. Me just telling you, look, I'm a whatever is very cheap. If I go and send a very costly signal, that's important. And the same you can think about going to college. That's also a signal. Even if you don't learn anything, the fact that you were able to finish college, that's a signal that whatever, you have a certain IQ, you have a certain determination. Think about being in the Navy SEALs. Like imagine that I want to hire someone to work for me. And I know that person was a Navy SEAL. The job I need him for has nothing to do with being a Navy SEAL. But I do know that this guy is tough. Yeah. I won't be able to stay in the water for hours in the cold water over here, right? He has that's a kind of very costly signals.
There you go. So what are some other examples of signals that people use in everyday life or something? Can you give us kind of a run through maybe of some that come off the top of your head?
About this podcast, right? So imagine that we would talk about how much money you're paying me, right? So you can think about this as you'll pay me, I don't know, $10,000 for being on your show because you want interesting people, and I'm clearly very interesting. Or I can pay you $10,000 because I want to be on the show. I want to sell books, right? Or something else, right? Each one of them will have a very different interpretation of the situation. If you would have paid me, you would have looked at it very differently than if I would have paid you to be. Right, and the same goes for everything. You mentioned at the start that your colleague is charging $8 a month for a podcast. Then if he's boring, his listeners are going to be more pissed at him than with you, right? So
that's true.
You expect something different, right? So he cannot come and say, "Oh, it's Monday morning, I'm still waking up," right? He will have to be maybe more. Although I guess it's part of the charm, but
yeah. Are we always signaling in life when we go through life? Like I make Facebook posts that like say, "Don't tread on me, don't screw with me." Is that signaling when we use social media to post stuff? Like, we're posting, we're eating for breakfast in the morning and posting our vacations on social media. Is social media a form of signaling?
I think so. It's a very strong form of signaling that I completely don't understand, right? So I don't understand the young people. I feel really old, but people that just when they get the food, they just take pictures of the food. Why would someone want to see your breakfast? I have no clue. I don't understand it. But yes, it is signaling. Look, I'm having a good time. I'm so successful that I can go to whatever, to Hawaii, to vacation. And everyone is happy in this, right? The stuff they're making at least happy faces, right? So it's kind of signaling. Look, everything is great with me.
Yeah, I share my really nice food. Like if it's a really nice burger or something, if it's really a nice meal, I'm out at a nice restaurant and stuff, I'll share it. But I usually I do it because I'm a narcissistic sadist, I usually don't share it until like about 10 o'clock at night when people are climbing into bed. And they're going to see like a nice slice of pie or a nice burger, and they're going to fall off their diet. And so basically it's sharing the misery loves company concept of like, if I have to be fat and have my diet ruined, you're going to share in the misery with me. So that's my plan. That's really what
I guess that's part of why people like you, right? You have a certain kind of people. So I'll be very happy to see it because I also need a diet. And if I see that you were worse than me, that makes me happy that.
Well, if we all see that we're all eating shitty food and getting fat and stuff, then we feel less shamed. It's less shaming that goes on. It's a kind of reverse shaming, if you will.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, people will write me and be like, how come you post that shit at 11 o'clock at night when I'm crawling into bed, you jerk? And I'm like, that's the reason I post it.
Exactly. Right.
Misery loves company is my policy. That's
right. And
I'm not sharing that pie to make you.
Different people get different stuff. I smoke cigars, for example, right? Too many cigars, and they share it. And I'm sure that 95% of the people that I know think that I'm an idiot for doing this because I'm going to die from horrible death. And the other 5% that are the people I care about. So
yeah. Well, who was it? Burns? Who was the comedian? George Burns. He lived till he's like 90, smoking cigars. So hopefully you got the good genetics.
It's not smart to eat burgers like you or me, or to smoke cigars. It's not smart, but it's
it's
fun.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of veganese now in my old age. My body's like, we're not doing this shit with you anymore. No more booze, no more eating badly, and all that good stuff. So we go through life and we signal who we are. I learned this. Tell me if I'm interpreting your book correctly. We go through life sending out interpretations of who we are. Like there's that scene in Fight Club. Like, the guy goes, hey man, I had all the things, I had all the furniture, I had that couch forever. And we do a lot of things to signal, what I need to do. Like one of the things I learned in advertising very early on, especially owning a modeling agency back in the day, was that when women look at advertisements, like in Vogue or something, they see the beautiful woman who's in there and they see the clothes and they want those clothes. And they see the woman, they go, hey, where do I go to buy those clothes? Men look at the man in the background of most of those advertisements and go, how do I got to dress to signal to get that woman? And that's what a lot of men do. The watches we buy, the clothes we wear, the cars we buy, we do that to signal, kind of like a breeding sort of thing. And maybe you can equate this to nature when nature does that. I was watching a TikTok the other day and this bird was flapping his wings around a female to try and impress her for breeding. And so that's kind of like the signaling that we do, right? In telling people, hey, here I am, and maybe you want to mate with me or something, stuff like that.
Right. So basically the two of us gave up. We just have our black t-shirts and that's it.
We gave up a long time ago.
Yeah. No, I think it's absolutely true, but it's more than that. So even about myself, but definitely about others, I get signals. I see you now, I see your cap, I see your t-shirt, I see your background, and I build a story around this, right? I'm trying to see who you are, right? I'm trying to guess who you are, and then you're telling me that you're too fat. Then you're telling me that you like to annoy people. You're saying that, all these things, and I build a story around it. And the incentive is part of the story. The incentive tells me more about you than you might imagine.
There you go. And people go, Chris Voss is an asshole. No, I'm just kidding, people. I
You
just have a
said
high. Yeah, there you go. I'm signaling again, right?
Okay.
This still, I don't know if you're ever a Rush fan, but there was an album they had called Signals, and I believe there's something on the album that refers to that. But this falls in line with some of the things we're still doing. In business, how is signaling and sending incentives or incentivizing employees and stuff to work better? What are some different ways we can talk about that you have in your book?
So think, for example, of let's start with the top, a CEO, right? You want to hire a CEO and you tell that person, look, I really care for the long run. So I ask you to work hard and get our company in 10 years to where we want, right? But then you incentivize her based on quarterly earnings. What is she going to do, right? What is she going to think about 10 years from now, or is she going to think about the next quarter, right? Think about our governor and, any governor. So in California, we need maybe a fast train from San Diego all the way to San Francisco. If he'll go and invest in it now, he'll have to take resources from other places. Everyone will hate him for that. And 20, 30 years from now is when the train is going to run. He's going to be long gone by then. Right? So the same with the CEO or the governor or many other things. We tell them, look, we really want you to care about the long run, but then we give them incentives for the short run. And that's a mistake. So if I would have owned the company, if I would have been one of the billionaires that you're interviewing at my company, had to hire a CEO, I would tell that person, look, I'm not going to judge you based on the quarterly earnings. If you need to invest in new computer network, go for it. Make the investment now. I know that the quarterly earnings are going to go down, but I trust you to think about the long run.
There you go. We had, I think it was Sam, I'd have to pull up the name, but I had a CEO on a major company, and he got really honest with me about how one of the biggest problems with CEOs is they overturn about every 4 years or so. And so they don't really get a chance. We see the same thing with presidents and politicians. They don't really sometimes get a chance to see the fruition of the visions and stuff that they outline. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. Jay Samit was on the show with us today in his book, Future Proofing You. And we talked about that. And it was kind of interesting. In my book, Beacons of Leadership, I used the reference of a lighthouse that a leader signals through that lighthouse. He signals his morals, his intent, his trust. Everything comes from that, whether leaders realize it or not. And even leadership as a parent, what you're signaling to your children and stuff of who you truly are. And you can't bullshit people through that. As a child, I grew up with my parents, and sometimes they were trying to do the right thing, but they would tell me stuff just to keep me in line. And I'd be like, yeah, but you don't do as you say or do as you walk or walk the talk. And so, that's really important, the signaling you send to people, and also truth, trust, intent, whether you're a hypocrite, whether you're true to your nature, et cetera, et cetera. I hope everything I always signal, whether people like me or not, is authentic and straightforward, and people still get a sense of me, even though I'm an asshole.
Right. So, but we all do it. So think about when my son turned 3. And I love this age. You start communicating with you, everything is good. And then they also start lying, because that's what kids do. We told him, look, you shouldn't lie. Only bad people lie. Took him to Disney World a couple of months after his birthday, get to the cashier. We see that, under 3, it's free. Over 3-year-old, $117. No hesitation. I said, this almost 3, which is, just from the wrong direction, right? So we're talking about this. Then, half an hour later, he pulled my hand and said, Daddy, you told me that only bad people lie. And right?
Busted.
On my bullshit, right? So it's very hard to juggle everything, right?
Busted.
Yeah,
Busted.
exactly.
There you go. And so this is important in aspect in business as it is in personal life, and really thinking about how we signal. So in writing the book, is your hope that to give us more thinking about who we are, what we're signaling, and the effect that might have, good, bad, or evil?
Look, everyone has their fun in life. For me, it's looking at incentive. What motivates people? Why do we do what we do? And I think that's my goal. My goal is to try and share this, what you think is fun, right? And understanding why do incentives go wrong? So many people tell me, many companies I try to work with tell me, oh, we tried incentives, it didn't work. And the analogy that I like is, imagine that you go to a bad Japanese restaurant and your conclusion is that Japanese food is bad. No, you were unlucky with the restaurant. Same is true for incentives. There are many ways of running the incentives, and if you don't do it well, that's going to not to work. But if you do it well, you can get too much more. So that's the
Definitely. I mean, it makes all the difference in the world. But it's interesting. Like I say, social media is a big thing of signalers, where people are signaling all sorts of stuff. Everything that goes into what we're doing, we're kind of signaling, I guess, who we are in the workplace, and incentivizing and trying to go different ways. Why would a bad incentive might be worse than no incentives at all when we're trying to incentivize people?
Think about the Wells Fargo. That's already a decade ago, I think, but the CEO over there had a great idea. He said, let's give people, our workers, incentive to, so if you have a bank account, also to have a credit card and 8 other products, whatever they're selling.
Yeah.
And they have huge incentives for this. And if you didn't meet it, they would fire you. So there were thousands of people. At the end, they fired, if I remember correctly, like 5,000 workers they had to fire. They just came to the office in the morning, had their morning coffee, sat at their computer terminal, and just made up accounts, made up credit cards, and canceled them.
Yeah.
Right? So the incentive itself wasn't bad. You want to have more, pay for it. But then you must have some kind of audit to make sure that they don't cheat.
Yeah.
That's not what you want, right? So in this case, it would have been much better not to give incentives to create it. If you cannot find a way to balance it with some kind of audit, just don't do it.
Yeah, I remember back in the day, one of my first things I did when I was young, before I really got my entrepreneur down, is I worked for a company where we would sell industrial products. It was called Car Industries. I think they're still around, out of Indiana. And so we would sell like shop supplies, welding, anything you needed in a shop. And I remember working with government agencies, like city government agencies. I go into their shops and sell, and that had my accounts. And I remember working with them, and it was funny. That was the first time I learned that these companies would have budgets in city government, or in any government, I think nowadays. But they would have these budgets they'd be given every year. And every year, when they would come to the end of the year on their budgets, they would call me up and say, "Hey, Chris, bring the catalog down. We need to buy a bunch of shit."
Right.
And I would come in and I'd be like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they're like, "Oh, see, there's this thing, Chris, where we have a budget we're given every year. And if we don't spend all the money in the budget that year, they claw back that amount of money that's left over because we figure we don't need it. So we just got to buy a bunch of, just got to buy a bunch of crap."
Right. Here we go. That's a definitely bad incentive, right? So if you don't roll it over, so, it's not, I have a research budget every year. If I don't spend it, it doesn't roll over to the next year. Guess what I'm doing, just before the end of the year, I buy stuff I don't need, right?
Yeah.
Clearly a bad incentive. Clearly not the smart way of incentivizing.
Yeah, and then we wonder why governments, and military budgets and different things get out of control, and, what's that old line? Something
it's about even worse than that, because if you don't use it next year, they're going to reduce your budget. Also, right? And your status in the company, in the government is very strongly linked to how much budget you're controlling.
Yeah. And they would just buy up like all stupid crap they would never buy. And it's like, just give us that. I'm like, you don't use this. And they're like, yeah, well, just give it to us. We have to spend this money, and we really didn't spend enough this year, and so we've got to load it up. And I would see that across all my government things. I was really crazy.
It's our money, right? It's the taxpayer.
Exactly. Money. Here in Utah, they have a law or something where all the road construction crews have to all get jobs. It's like socialism or communism. Everybody has to get a job. And so they have to make it so that everybody who's a road construction crew gets work. And part of the problem is in Utah there's only a limited amount of time they can work on roads and do
Right.
traffic work and stuff because of the snow. So you have a very small window of time. I don't know what is 6 months, maybe 9, where you can do this work on the roads before snow comes, and it's impossible to do any of this work. So everyone's got to cram, and so it's like a big cram session, and it's interesting, just the amount of money that gets blown out for these things and stuff. So there you go. Anything more you want to touch on about sending signals, mixed signals, and what you hope people learn from your book?
That, like I said, that incentives send signals, and if you learn how to manage them, if you learn that paying 5 cents for a soda can is a bad idea, so that paying your workers for quantity will get you lots of quantity with bad quality.
Yeah.
Just think about it before that. So in many cases, you see that companies don't have what I like to call a common sense officer. So they have a CEO, CFO, all the good stuff, but not common sense, right? So they don't have someone over there who will say, guys, are you stupid? And it's usually, think about engineers, for example, or economists for that matter, right? They are really good. They find a solution. They invest hundreds of millions of dollars in finding the solution. And then no one uses it because they don't have the common sense in many cases, in too many cases, right? So have someone with common sense that will tell you, look, guys, that's a bad idea. Or look, here's how you can make it better.
Maybe that's what we really need to have. We need to have common sense officers. I kind of like that idea because we have so much other things. We have inclusion officers and all this new things that are coming about. We need to have a common sense officer.
We should start a movement. Let's
make it a thing, because one of the things that made me successful at being an entrepreneur and being an entrepreneur when I worked for other companies was being that common sense officer. I'd walk into apartments and go, why do we do it this way? And people would say, I don't know. We always did it this way.
Yeah, exactly. We always did it. That's a good answer, right?
Or they would say to me, well, I don't know, Chris, you told us to do it this way, so we do it this way. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm looking at it now, and it seems kind of dumb. Like, this doesn't seem like it really works. And
by the way, that's a great example of failing, right? So if you would be punished for having a bad idea, you would never say it was bad. You would keep pushing it. But you were fortunate enough to work in a place in which you said, maybe it was my idea, but it's still a dumb idea.
Yeah.
Right? Let's do it better. That's the right way. That's the right incentives.
That's the way I always worked. I was always like, there has to be a better way. There's always something you can improve on. And whatever you've innovated, whenever you've made something better, there's still a better way that you can make that better. And that was one of the cruxes of what I was always doing with my business. I was always looking, like I always use the example, like when I was younger, I thought pretty much with paper clips, everything, you built the perfect thing, or staples, you built the perfect thing. And then people came out with all these innovations. Well, you can paint them. Well, you can design them just a little bit differently. Well, you can put some edges on them so that they claw to the paper a little bit better. It seems like there's a never ending cycle of anything that can be improved, kind of like Moore's Law, I suppose. And so it's great that people do that. But yeah, there needs to be common sense in companies where somebody goes, hey, you know what? Did somebody think this through? And I like your concept of where, we should really look at incentives. What's the good part about this? What is this going to motivate? Or how can this really backfire or demotivate sometimes? Maybe
people are really creative at gaming incentives. If you're not smart enough, so that's the second part of it. Maybe even if you come up with incentives that look good to you, look at data. Try it for a while before you make it a fixed feature of what you have, right? So people are really creative at gaming incentives.
There you go. Well, this has been really insightful, Yuri. It's been wonderful to have you on, and brilliant insights and life and everything else, and all that good stuff. I love the cover of the book too. How you've got the signals there. I'm gonna have to go back to the Rush album, Signals. It was a great album that had subdivisions on that album. No, maybe that might have been another one. But New World Man, there's a lot of great stuff on there. But I think they talked about Signals in the album, and so I'll have to go back to that. I don't know why I'm plugging Rush albums at this point, but I'm a big fan. Anyway, thank you very much, Yuri, for coming on. Give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs, please.
Was a lot of fun. My .com, so it's that's a good question. LinkedIn, Yuri Gneezy, and so it's also on Twitter. That's my social media. I told you I'm old. I'm not.
There you go. It's all the places you signal.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Monis, for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, and LinkedIn and the big LinkedIn newsletter, where we do all our signaling, if you will. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.